Sometimes, the most powerful weapon in corporate warfare isn't what you say, but what you choose not to. A lesson I learned when my 11-year career was demolished in exactly 8 words. You're fired. We don't need lazy people like you. The clock on my kitchen wall seemed to mock me as I stared at my phone, watching it light up for the 17th time that morning. Each call represented a tiny fracture in Ryan Cole's hastily constructed plan to rid himself of me, and I savored every missed ring like sips of the finest wine. Revenge, I was discovering, tasted better when served at room temperature, with patience, and just a hint of professional courtesy. I still remember the moment as if it just happened. I was standing by the office coffee machine, adding a dash of oat milk to my morning blend when Ryan, the new CEO and son of the company's founder, walked into the break room. He didn't greet me, he didn't smile. He just looked at me like I was part of the furniture he decided to throw out. Lily, I need to see you in my office. Now. It wasn't a request. The timbre of his voice carried the entitlement of someone who had inherited authority without earning respect. A quality I'd observed in him since his father had begun grooming him for leadership 3 years prior. The hallway to his office seemed longer than usual that morning, each step on the polished marble taking me closer to what I didn't yet know would be both an ending and the most powerful beginning of my professional life. The portraits of past company leaders lined the walls, stern-faced men and women who had built Cole Industries from a small regional supplier into an international powerhouse. Among them was Richard Cole Sr., Ryan's father, whose piercing eyes seemed to follow me as I walked, as if trying to warn me. I had been with the company for nearly 11 years. In that time, I had built the client services department from scratch, negotiated over 100 contracts, and trained most of the team that now sat just outside his office door. But none of that mattered to Ryan. His father, Mr. Cole, had built the company with grit and loyalty. Ryan inherited the title and apparently thought it gave him the right to play God. The morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ryan's corner office caught the dust particles dancing in the air, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the cold exchange that was about to unfold. His office was immaculate, too immaculate, like it belonged to someone who wanted to project competence rather than embody it. He didn't even sit down. "You're fired," he said, voice flat, emotionless. "We don't need lazy people like you dragging this place down." I blinked. First, I thought it was some kind of twisted joke. The words hung in the air between us, suspended like the dust particles, waiting to settle into reality. I watched his face for any sign of humanity, a twitch of regret, a flicker of empathy, but found nothing but the cold, calculated stare of someone who had practiced this moment, perhaps rehearsed it in front of his bathroom mirror until he achieved the exact degree of corporate detachment he thought defined leadership. "Excuse me." I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. My mind raced through the previous week's meetings and reports. I had just closed the Westridge account 2 days ago, a $3.2 million deal that had been on the verge of collapse before I stepped in. Had I missed something? Was there a performance issue I hadn't been informed about? "You heard me," he replied, casually flipping through a stack of papers like he was deciding what to have for lunch. "You can collect your things and leave, effective immediately." I stared at him, stunned. My heart pounded in my ears. The room seemed to vibrate with the force of my pulse, each beat sending a wave of confusion and anger through my body. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, to demand an explanation, but instead I smiled, a calm, polite, deliberate smile. In that moment, I made a choice that would ultimately save my career and reshape the company's future, though I couldn't have known it then. "Understood," I said. "Have a nice day, Ryan." The look of surprise that flickered across his face was brief, but unmistakable. He had expected tears, pleading anger. Anything but this composed acceptance. For a split second, His mask of authority slipped, revealing the insecure son still desperate for his father's approval. He recovered quickly, but I had seen it, the weakness beneath the armor. I walked out of his office with my head high, but inside I was trembling. The glass walls that surrounded the executive suite offered no privacy. My teammates looked at me as I passed, sensing something was wrong. A few started to stand, ready to ask questions, but I gave them a subtle shake of the head. Don't make this harder. The open concept office that had once felt like a second home now stretched before me like a gauntlet I had to run one final time. Faces turned as I walked, some confused, others concerned. A few carefully blank in that way colleagues perfect, when they don't want to be associated with someone who's fallen from grace. The finance team, huddled near the water cooler, parted as I approached, their conversation dying abruptly. I could almost hear their thoughts. What did she do? Is it contagious? Should we say something? I smiled at them too, the same measured smile I'd given Ryan. The marble tiles of the main lobby echoed with my footsteps as I approached the security desk. Marcus, the guard who had greeted me every morning for over a decade, looked up with his usual warm smile, then faltered when he saw my expression. Miss Harris? Everything all right? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Just heading out early today, Marcus. His eyes fell to the small box of personal items I carried. The framed photo of my sister's family, the handmade mug from our company retreat in Colorado, the small potted succulent that had somehow survived years under the harsh office lighting. His face softened with understanding. I'll see you tomorrow then, he asked, though we both knew it was unlikely. Take care, Marcus, I replied, fishing my badge from my pocket and placing it on his desk. It was funny how 11 years of loyalty, dedication, and achievement could be reduced to a plastic rectangle with a bad photo. I packed my desk in silence, the routine motions of emptying drawers and unplugging chargers providing a strange comfort in their mundanity. Each item I placed in the cardboard box marked another memory. The conference in Dubai where I'd secured our first international client. The late-night strategy session that had saved the Thompson account. The impromptu birthday celebration where my team had surprised me with cupcakes after I'd mentioned offhandedly that I'd never had a proper birthday party as a child. 11 years of my life, packed away in less than 15 minutes. The drive home was a blur. Traffic lights changed, cars moved around me, but I drove on autopilot. Muscle memory guiding me through familiar streets, while my mind replayed the morning's events on a continuous loop. As I drove, memories flooded my mind. 11 years. 11. I had given this company more time than I gave my own family. Late nights, working through holidays, taking calls while holding back tears after my divorce. I gave them everything. And now I was dismissed like I was nothing. But I wasn't angry, not yet. I was curious. Why? That question haunted me all night. I barely slept. Something about the way Ryan had said it, so confidently, so carelessly, didn't sit right. The timing was strange, too. We were about to finalize one of the company's largest contracts. A deal I had spent 6 months preparing. I knew the client inside and out. I had even booked the final review meeting for that Friday. And now I was gone. Had he even looked at the contract details? The soft pink light of dawn was just beginning to filter through my bedroom curtains when I finally gave up on sleep. I made coffee, stronger than usual, and sat at my kitchen island, staring at the business card I'd kept in my wallet for years but never used. Richard Cole Sr.'s personal number. Given to me after I'd salvaged a particularly disastrous negotiation 5 years earlier. If you ever need anything, Lily, he'd said. Anything at all. I'd never called. Pride perhaps. Or the stubborn belief that advancement should come through merit rather than connections. But now, with my career in tatters and questions swirling in my mind, I found myself wondering if it was time. Before I could decide, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number. I let it ring, unsure if I could handle another blow, but curiosity won again. Lily. It's Mr. Cole. The voice sent a jolt down my spine. The real CEO. The man who had hired me 11 years ago after a single interview. I just walked into the office, he said. And I could hear the tightness in his throat. Why the hell did you pack up and leave? What happened? I hesitated. Your son fired me. Silence. Then with a sharp inhale. What? Yesterday. I continued, my voice steadier than I expected. He said I was lazy and that I wasn't needed anymore. There was a long pause before he spoke again, this time slowly, like he was trying to stay calm. Lily, did he read your contract? I furrowed my brows. What do you mean? He's supposed to finalize the Kingswell deal today, isn't he? Yes. We were scheduled to meet them at 11. Jesus Christ. I could hear papers rustling in the background, then a loud thud like he'd slammed something on his desk. Lily, your contract has a clause, he said, one I insisted on after the last acquisition disaster. You're not just the account manager. You're the only authorized negotiator for the Kingswell deal. I froze. He can't close the deal without you, Mr. Cole continued. Not legally, not ethically, not even practically. That contract will fall apart unless you're there. A slow-burning realization settled in my chest. He hadn't read it. Ryan had no idea what he'd done. And that's when something inside me shifted. The betrayal still hurt, yes. But now I felt something else entirely. Control. He had pulled the trigger far too quickly, and now the gun was pointed at himself. Mr. Cole hung up without another word. I could feel his fury through the silence that followed. I sat motionless in my apartment, coffee growing cold beside me, staring at nothing in particular. He didn't know. His son had fired me without even reading the contract. I leaned back on the couch and let out a quiet, bitter laugh. After 11 years, this was it, undone by a spoiled, impulsive man-boy trying to play CEO, making decisions like they were moves in a video game. But real companies don't respawn after bad calls, and this one was about to find that out the hard way. I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. Part of me wanted to get dressed and show up to the office just to watch the fallout unfold. But another part, the one that had endured years of thankless overtime and swallowed my pride more times than I could count, wanted to let them burn. The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across my living room floor. I showered, more to clear my head than out of any real need for cleanliness, and changed into comfortable clothes. Not my usual work attire. No pencil skirt or blazer today. I made fresh coffee and tried to focus on a book, but the words swam before my eyes, meaningless shapes on a page. My mind kept returning to the Kingswell contract, to the months of careful preparation, the delicate relationship building, the meticulous attention to cultural sensitivities that had earned us the trust of the conservative Saudi executives. I had learned Arabic specifically for this deal, studied their business customs, spent countless hours on research that Ryan had probably never even glanced at. I didn't have to wait long. At 10:13 a.m., I got another call. This time it was Ryan. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, another call, this one from reception. Then legal. Then accounting. I stared at my phone as it buzzed nonstop, lighting up like a Christmas tree. I didn't answer a single one. The voicemail icon blinked at me, relentless. I tapped it open. Lily, hi, it's Ryan. His voice was strained. Listen, there was a misunderstanding yesterday. I might have acted too fast. We need you back today. It's urgent. Please call me. Urgent. The word rolled around in my head like a marble in a glass. He hadn't said sorry, not once, not even in a fake corporate way. Instead, it was panic disguised as politeness. I took a sip of my cold coffee, still not moving from the couch. At 10:32 my phone buzzed again. This time, a number I hadn't saved in years. Nicole, a former colleague. We'd grown close back when she was in my department before she transferred to marketing. Picked up. Lily, you won't believe what's happening here, she said. Her voice barely above a whisper. Try me. Ryan just got chewed out by his dad like in front of everyone. The meeting room was full. Mr. Cole walked in and slammed the Kingswell contract on the table. I raised an eyebrow. He brought the contract. Oh yeah. And he asked one question. Did you read this before firing Lily? And Ryan tried to bluff, said something about moving in a new direction and reevaluating roles, but Mr. Cole didn't buy it. He flipped to the clause you always talked about, the one that says you're the sole negotiator on the Kingswell account. That clause was there for a reason. I knew it. Everyone knew it except Ryan. She paused for a moment. I could hear office murmurs in the background. Lily, he looked pale. Like ghost pale. He realized he's the reason Kingswell's about to walk. I exhaled slowly. And what did Mr. Cole say? He told him, if this deal falls through, your position here becomes negotiable. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. There it was, the first crack in Ryan's armor. I don't know what you're planning, Nicole added. But whatever it is, you have the upper hand now. I ended the call with a soft thank you. Then stood and looked out the window. The skyline was quiet still. I always found comfort in that. The city indifferent to human chaos going on as usual. At 11:15, another message came through. This time from Mr. Cole himself. Lily, I'm sincerely sorry for what happened. I misjudged the situation. Please come in, not just for the deal, but so we can talk privately. It was tempting, but I wasn't ready to just walk back in like nothing happened. Not yet. Ryan's mistake wasn't just about a contract. It was about respect, about trust, and about the years I had given, years that couldn't be replaced by a panicked phone call and a seat at a negotiation table. Still, something stirred inside me. I wasn't a petty person, but I wasn't weak either. I didn't want revenge. I wanted accountability. I picked up my phone and finally responded. Not with a call, but a message. I'll consider returning to finalize the Kingswell deal, but only under specific conditions. I'd like to speak with Mr. Cole directly beforehand. I hit send. Then I changed out of my pajamas and began to prepare. I chose my outfit carefully. A charcoal gray suit that I'd purchased for a conference in New York, paired with a deep burgundy blouse that added a subtle touch of power without being ostentatious. My makeup was precise, professional, a shield against the scrutiny I knew I would face. I gathered my notes on the Kingswell deal, reviewing key points that might have been overlooked in my absence. As I prepared, I could almost hear my grandmother's voice, a woman who had risen through the ranks of a male-dominated industry in the 1970s. Always walk in like you own the room, even when they're trying to show you the door. By the time I arrived at the office, it was just past noon. I didn't use the employee entrance. I walked through the main lobby like a guest. A move I knew would draw attention. Everyone knew I had been fired the day before. My return now was more than a quiet comeback. It was a statement. The receptionist stood up the moment she saw me. Miss Harris, Lily, she stammered. Mr. Cole is expecting you. Right this way. As I followed her down the hall, I noticed the atmosphere had changed. People looked up from their desks. Conversations paused. There was a sense of quiet tension, like the building itself was holding its breath. I could feel eyes on me, some sympathetic, others curious. A few wary. The dynamics had shifted, and everyone was waiting to see how the pieces would fall. Mr. Cole was standing at the door to his office when I arrived. He wasn't smiling. Lily, he said, nodding. Thank you for coming in. I nodded back, but didn't extend my hand. He stepped aside, letting me walk past him into the office. It was quiet for a moment as I took a seat across from his massive oak desk. He closed the door behind him, leaned against it, and let out a long sigh. I made a mistake, he began. A big one. I gave my son too much authority too fast. I wanted him to prove himself, but I didn't expect him to burn bridges before even learning how to build them. I stayed silent. He sat down. His voice softened. What he did to you was unprofessional, disrespectful, and frankly, it jeopardized a deal we've worked over half a year to secure. I nodded slowly. Yes, it did. I read the contract again this morning. Every word. You were given full autonomy over the Kingswell account legally. The client won't recognize anyone else as a representative of this company during negotiations. That clause was put in place after the Steel Ridge debacle. I remember it well. So do I. I said quietly. I was the one who managed the fallout. His eyes met mine. You didn't deserve what happened yesterday, he said. And I'd like to offer you your job back. With full authority to finish the deal. Whatever conditions you need, we'll make them work. There was sincerity in his tone, regret too. But this wasn't just about the deal. It was about leadership. Accountability, dignity. I'll return, I said. But I want everything in writing. A revised contract, clear autonomy over Kingswell, and no interference from Ryan. He nodded immediately. Done. And one more thing, I added, voice firm. This can't happen again. Not to me, not to anyone else. Weighted silence followed. Then he gave me a slow, thoughtful nod. You have my word. With that, I stood. The moment I stepped out of his office, I could see Ryan standing down the hall, arms crossed, pretending to be deep in conversation with a junior executive. But his eyes locked on mine the second I appeared. I didn't flinch. I didn't look away. I walked straight past him, and I swear for a second, I saw the exact moment he realized his control was slipping. By 1 p.m., the boardroom was ready. The Kingswell team had just arrived, and we had about 30 minutes before the official meeting. I reviewed the documents one last time, confirming all the points we had previously negotiated. Their CEO, Mr. Saad, was a no-nonsense man with sharp instincts. He valued trust above all, and any whiff of internal disorganization would send him running. As I placed the printed Arabic translation of the final terms onto the table, I caught sight of Ryan pacing outside the glass walls of the meeting room, like a caged animal. Mr. Cole stepped out to intercept him. Their muffled voices escalated quickly until Mr. Cole's hand shot up, silencing him. Ryan's face turned crimson. He looked over his shoulder at me with a mix of rage and humiliation. Then he walked away. That was the last time I saw him that day. At 1:30 sharp, Mr. Saad entered with his aides. I greeted him in Arabic, and his eyes lit up. He smiled, a rare gesture from him. You remembered, he said warmly. Respect goes a long way. The meeting began. It went flawlessly. 2 hours later, we shook hands and signed the deal. After they left, Mr. Cole approached me again. This time, his face showed genuine relief. You saved us, he said, and I owe you more than an apology. You owe your company a leader, I replied. One who knows the difference between power and responsibility. He didn't argue. Later that evening, as I walked to my car, the tension I'd carried for the past 48 hours finally began to lift. I had come back not as an employee, but as someone who understood her value and demanded it be recognized. But I also knew this wasn't over. Ryan might have been quiet today, but men like him don't disappear. They retreat, and then they retaliate. The parking garage was nearly empty, most employees having left for the day. My footsteps echoed against the concrete walls as I made my way to my car. The events of the day played through my mind like scenes from a movie. The tense meeting with Mr. Cole, the carefully orchestrated negotiation with the Kingswell team, The palpable relief that had washed over the boardroom when the contracts were signed. I had pulled it off, saved the deal, perhaps even saved my career. But at what cost? The company would never feel the same to me again. Trust, once broken, is like a cracked mirror. You can glue the pieces back together, but you'll always see the fracture lines when you look closely enough. As I reached my car, I noticed a small white envelope tucked under the windshield wiper. My name was written across it in neat, precise handwriting that I didn't recognize. I hesitated before opening it, half expecting some kind of threat or warning from Ryan or one of his allies. Instead, I found a simple note card with 5 words. "We're glad you're still here." No signature, no indication of who had left it. But it warmed something inside me that I hadn't realized had gone cold. Maybe the cracks could be repaired after all. By the following week, the Kingswell deal had made headlines in our industry newsletter. Breakthrough in cross-border negotiations. Coal Company secures historic partnership with Middle Eastern distributor through tailored strategy and multilingual leadership. They didn't mention me by name, but everyone in the company knew who had sealed that deal. My inbox was flooded with quiet congratulations, internal messages from staff who had stayed silent during the storm. Some were from juniors I'd mentored years ago. Others were from managers who had once ignored me in meetings but now praised my leadership under pressure. I appreciated their words. But I wasn't naive. I knew how quickly people shift when the wind changes direction. The mood around the office had lightened. There were smiles, laughter again in the break room. Mr. Cole had made it clear Ryan was no longer involved in high-level decision-making until further notice. And yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Small things began to happen. First, it was the expense reports. The reimbursement for my travel to the Kingswell meeting was delayed. Then documents I had submitted for approval were returned to me and signed, without explanation. Next, an email I never sent, allegedly from my address, was flagged by IT. It contained incorrect client information and had been forwarded to one of our overseas partners. Luckily, the partner was someone I had a good relationship with, and he reached out directly to clarify. But the mistake had already planted doubt. I reported it to our internal systems team. They said there was no sign of external hacking. The message had originated from inside the office. That's when I knew Ryan was behind it. He was no longer trying to fire me, that approach had failed. Now he wanted to make me look incompetent, to smear my reputation slowly, subtly, until I either quit in frustration or someone else decided I was a liability. It was classic corporate sabotage. And it wasn't the first time I'd seen it. Back at my first job, fresh out of university, I worked under a director who played the same game. He wouldn't confront you directly, but he'd cut off your resources, isolate you from projects, quietly poison your name until the only option left was to disappear. But I wasn't 22 anymore. I wasn't going to disappear. I documented everything, every missed email, every mistake that I hadn't made, every delay. I had learned the hard way that paper trails are more powerful than emotions in environments like this. I even started using a private notebook, logging times, dates, conversations just in case. Then one afternoon, I overheard something that confirmed my suspicions. I was passing the conference room when I heard Ryan's voice inside, too loud for a private discussion. "She's unstable," he said. "Since she came back, she's been erratic, aggressive. I don't think she's fit to manage high-pressure clients." I stopped in my tracks. "I'm just saying," he continued, "maybe we should start thinking about succession planning for client services. She's clearly overextended." Another voice responded, someone I didn't recognize, a newer executive maybe. "But the Kingswell deal, she pulled that off under serious pressure." Ryan scoffed. "She got lucky. We can't run a company on luck." I stood frozen for a few moments, then quietly walked away. My blood ran cold. Not out of fear, but from the icy precision of his tactics. He was planting seeds again, poisoning the well. That evening, I stayed late. The office was quiet, the halls dim. I sat alone in the glass meeting room, staring at the city lights, wondering how many more battles I would have to fight just to keep doing my job. And then a voice broke the silence. "Still here?" I looked up. It was Mr. Cole. "I could ask you the same," I replied. He stepped inside, placed a folder on the table. "Your revised contract, with everything we agreed on." I opened it, read through the language. It was solid. I nodded in approval. "I've also started an internal audit," he added. "Too many things have been misfiled lately." I looked up sharply. He met my gaze. "I'm not blind, Lily. I know Ryan isn't finished." "Why haven't you stopped him?" I asked. There was a long pause before he answered. Because I needed to see how far he'd go." He sounded tired, more like a father than a CEO in that moment. "You're protecting the company," I said. He shook his head slowly. "I'm trying to protect both of you, but maybe it's too late for one of you." I closed the folder. "I don't need protection. I need you to decide what kind of legacy you want to leave behind." His eyes lingered on mine, then he turned and left. And I knew something bigger was coming. The office felt colder that week, not because of the weather but because the air between people had changed. Conversations dropped to whispers when I walked by. Some employees smiled at me. Others avoided eye contact altogether. The internal audit had begun and everyone knew it. People were nervous. So was I. I hadn't asked Mr. Cole to launch an audit, but deep down I was relieved that he had. I needed the truth out in the open, not just for me, but for everyone who had been walking on eggshells since Ryan took over. Though I knew how this game worked in corporations. Truth doesn't always lead to justice. Sometimes it leads to quiet exits and golden handshakes. Sometimes it's buried so deep behind red tape that the damage becomes irreversible. That Thursday, I was called into the audit committee's temporary office. An old storage room turned war room. Files were stacked on tables, monitors glowed with data, and a whiteboard was filled with timelines and digital breadcrumbs. David, the lead internal auditor, greeted me. "Lily, thanks for coming in. We'd like to ask you a few questions about some recent irregularities." I nodded and took a seat. He pulled up a file on the screen. "First, this email that appeared to be from your account. We've confirmed it was sent from a shared workstation near the break room. The credentials were manually entered. So someone had my login?" He shook his head. "No, someone had your credentials. Copied them most likely. This wasn't phishing. It was internal." I folded my arms. I reported that incident the day it happened. He gave a tight smile. "Yes, and we're glad you did. We found a few others like it. Emails rewritten, spreadsheets altered, sign-offs removed. Always traced to shared machines, always under your name." The weight in my chest grew heavier. "This was coordinated," I said. David hesitated. "Yes. And we've narrowed down the list of people who had access. We've also noticed unusual patterns linked to Ryan's executive assistant's login." I sat still. He continued carefully. "We're not accusing anyone yet, but there's a clear pattern. Sabotage intended to discredit you and possibly others." I clenched my jaw. "So what happens now?" "That's where it gets complicated," he said. "Mr. Cole asked us to present our findings directly to him. He's made it clear he wants the truth. All of it, no filters." I nodded slowly. "Then I'll be there." David raised his eyebrows. "You're not required." "I will be there," I repeated. "If this is going to surface, I want to look everyone in the eye." He didn't argue. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the others who had left quietly over the past year. Talented employees in their 30s and 40s who had simply moved on without much notice. People who had once been considered rising stars. I used to think it was just turnover. Now I wondered how many of them had been quietly pushed out by Ryan's games. I arrived early to the executive boardroom the next morning. Mr. Cole was already there, staring out the window like a man waiting for the final card to fall. David and 2 other auditors came in next. Then Ryan arrived, 10 minutes late, looking smug, phone in hand, not a trace of concern on his face. Until he saw me. He paused at the door. "She's not on the audit committee." Mr. Cole didn't turn. "She's here at my request." Ryan shifted his weight uncomfortably. "This is supposed to be internal. Confidential." "Then you should have kept it that way when you used company resources to fabricate emails," I said, my voice calm but sharp. Ryan scoffed. "That's ridiculous." David spoke up. "We've traced multiple login attempts tied to your assistant's account, all connected to irregularities targeting Lily's work. There's a clear timeline." Ryan's face began to shift, his practiced smugness cracking. "You're reaching. She's just bitter about being let go." I looked him in the eye. "You didn't let me go, Ryan. You sabotaged me. And you almost tanked the biggest deal this company has landed in 5 years. Mr. Cole finally turned. "I gave you a chance," he said quietly. "I gave you more than one. And you've done nothing but tear down the people trying to build something real here." Ryan's bravado faltered. "This isn't what you think." "No," Mr. Cole cut in. "It's worse." A heavy silence filled the room. Then Mr. Cole stood. "The board will be reviewing this report. Until then, you are suspended effective immediately." Ryan opened his mouth to protest, but the words never came. He looked at me one last time. This time not with rage but with disbelief, like he had finally realized that none of his usual tricks were going to save him now. He walked out in silence. I stayed behind. Mr. Cole exhaled, his shoulders sagging. "I failed him," he said. "As a leader and maybe as a father. You can't lead someone who refuses to grow." I said quietly. "But you can lead the company. You still have that choice." He looked at me then nodded, and for the first time since this all began, I felt the weight start to lift. 2 weeks had passed since the audit meeting, but the impact of that morning still echoed through every corner of the building. Ryan hadn't returned, and the once proud smirk he carried like a badge was now the stuff of whispered office gossip. The board moved quickly. The evidence was too strong, too detailed, too damning to ignore. The falsified emails, the login traces, the unexplained disappearance of files, the attempt to weaponize HR complaints, all under Ryan's direction or through people he manipulated. When the final report came out, it was clear Ryan hadn't just tried to sabotage me. He had compromised the integrity of the company itself. His suspension became a termination. The official announcement cited breaches of ethical conduct and internal misconduct. No lawsuits, no press release. Just a quiet exit through the back door of corporate history. But word spread anyway. I thought I'd feel triumphant when I heard the news. Instead, I felt calm, not victorious, just steady. Like I had weathered the storm and now I could finally breathe. A few days later, Mr. Cole called me into his office. "Close the door," he said. I did. He sat at his desk, a folder in front of him. But he didn't open it yet. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about everything that's happened," he began, "and what I want this company to be moving forward." I didn't speak. I let him finish. "You've shown more leadership in the past month than most executives show in a career. You protected our biggest deal, held your composure in a public humiliation, and navigated personal attacks with professionalism. That's the kind of person I want helping run this company." He slid the folder across the desk. Inside was a promotion letter, Director of Client Strategy, an executive-level role, one that reported directly to him. I looked up, startled. "I didn't ask for this." "I know," he said. That's why you deserve it. I hesitated, then gave him a small nod. If I accept this, I want a say in how we move forward. I don't want to just hold a title. I want to rebuild this culture. The right way. He smiled. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. Later that evening, as I sat alone in my new office, a temporary one while renovations were underway, I stared at the blank nameplate on the door. For years I'd walked these halls wondering if anyone really saw the work I did. The late nights, the client saves, the fires I put out without a single word of credit. I thought staying quiet was the best way to keep peace, to not cause friction. But silence had almost cost me everything. It wasn't just about a contract or a position. It was about remembering that competence is not arrogance, and professionalism is not weakness. I had been underestimated, dismissed, and sabotaged, but I had never been defeated. And I hadn't let myself become bitter in the process. That, to me, was the real win. The view from the executive floor was different. Not just physically but symbolically. From here, I could see the entire operation spread out before me, departments interconnected like a living organism. The lights in the design team's corner still burned bright despite the late hour. They were working on a pitch for a new German client. The sales floor was empty now, but tomorrow it would hum with the energy of ambitious young associates making calls, building relationships, chasing the next big win. I felt a sudden wave of responsibility for all of them. This promotion wasn't just about me, it was about what kind of workplace we were all going to share. My phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. Congratulations, Director Harris. Drinks tomorrow to celebrate. I smiled and typed back a quick absolutely. Then another message appeared, this one from Sarah in legal, who had quietly supported me through the audit process by making sure all the documentation was properly preserved. So proud of you. You changed things for all of us. That's when I realized what had really happened. This wasn't just my victory. It was a shift in the company's power structure. A rebalancing that would affect everyone. In the weeks that followed, I started reshaping the department. I reopened lines of communication, reinstated people who had been pushed out unfairly, created an anonymous reporting system, so no one else had to fear retaliation for speaking up. I even made time for the younger employees who were just starting out, some of whom had witnessed what I went through and quietly asked how I stayed strong. I told them the truth. You don't always get to pick the battles, I said, but you do get to decide who you become in the middle of them. My new role gave me access to parts of the company I'd never seen before, including the truth about how close we'd come to disaster. The Kingswell deal wasn't just important. It was essential. The company had leveraged significant resources on the promise of that partnership, and losing it would have triggered a cascade of financial repercussions. Ryan hadn't just risked my career. He'd gambled with the livelihoods of over 300 employees. The realization made my blood boil, but it also strengthened my resolve. This was bigger than personal vendettas. It was about building something that could withstand the storms of ego and ambition. As for Ryan, last I heard he was interviewing at smaller firms out of state, but his reputation had caught up with him. Some said Mr. Cole pulled strings to make sure his name didn't get dragged publicly. Maybe that was a father's last act of love. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. I was focusing on the future now. On the challenges ahead rather than the battles behind me. 3 months into my new role, I faced my first real test. We were pitching for an account that would expand our presence in the Asian market. A Japanese technology firm looking for Western representation. The competition was fierce, and our team was feeling the pressure. The night before the presentation, I found May, one of our junior strategists, still at her desk, surrounded by crumpled papers and empty coffee cups. I can't get this right, she said, frustration evident in her voice. I've been staring at these numbers for hours, and they still don't tell the story we need. I sat down beside her, looked at the data she was struggling with. Tell me what you see, I said. She blinked, confused. The quarterly projections aren't aligning with the market analysis. I can't make them work together. I nodded. And what does your instinct tell you? That we're looking at it wrong, she admitted. That there's another way to approach this market that we haven't considered. Then trust that, I said. Forget the template. Forget what's expected. Show me what you think is right. The look of surprise on her face reminded me of myself years ago, afraid to deviate from the script, to challenge the established way of doing things. Really, I confirmed. I'd rather see your best unconventional idea than a perfect execution of the wrong approach. The next morning, her revised strategy became the centerpiece of our pitch. It was bold, innovative, and exactly what the client had been looking for but couldn't articulate. We won the account, and May's contribution was acknowledged in front of the entire department. As we celebrated afterward, she pulled me aside. Thank you for trusting me, she said. Not many directors would take that risk. I smiled. It's not a risk when you believe in your people. The words came out automatically, but as soon as I said them, I realized they were the exact opposite of how Ryan had operated. He had seen employees as threats or tools, never as collaborators. The difference was everything. 6 months into my tenure as director, Mr. Cole called me into his office again. This time he wasn't alone. The board members were there, facing a large screen displaying financial projections. Lily, he said, perfect timing. We were just discussing the quarterly results. I scanned the numbers quickly. They were good, better than good. The Kingswell partnership had exceeded expectations, and the new Asian accounts were already showing promising returns. Impressive, I said. One of the board members, an older woman named Eleanor, whom I'd always admired from a distance, nodded. We were just saying the same about your department's performance. Client retention is up 22%, and acquisition costs are down 15%. That's unheard of in this economic climate. I acknowledged the compliment with a nod, then looked at Mr. Cole. There was something in his expression, something beyond professional satisfaction. There's more, he said. We're restructuring the executive team, creating a new position, Chief Client Officer. He paused, letting the implication sink in. We'd like you to consider it. À ces suites position. 6 months ago, I'd been fired. Now I was being offered a seat at the highest table. The irony wasn't lost on me, but this wasn't about vindication anymore. It was about vision, about who should guide the company's relationships with the people we served. I'll need to think about it, I said, surprising myself with the response. I could see the board members exchange glances. Most people would jump at such an offer without hesitation. Of course, Mr. Cole said, though I could tell he was surprised too. Take the weekend if you need it. Later, as I walked back to my office, Nicole caught up with me in the hallway. I heard, she whispered excitedly. Is it true? Chief Client Officer? News traveled fast in corporate corridors. How did you know already? She grinned. I have my sources. So, are you going to accept? I hesitated. I'm thinking about it. Her smile faltered. What's there to think about? It's perfect for you. It's everything you've worked for. Was it though? I'd never chased titles or power for their own sake. I'd wanted to build something meaningful, to create value, to be respected for my contributions. The position would give me the authority to do more of that, certainly. But it would also pull me further from the day-to-day work that I loved, the strategy sessions, the client interactions, the mentoring moments with people like May. I just want to make sure it's the right move, I told Nicole. For everyone. That night I sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. My phone lay silent beside me. I turned off notifications, needing the space to think without interruption. The offer was extraordinary, no doubt, but something kept nagging at me. A question I couldn't shake. What kind of leader did I want to be? I'd seen the damage caused by those who viewed leadership as a title rather than a responsibility. I'd experienced firsthand the cost of prioritizing power over people. If I accepted this role, would I eventually become what I had fought against? The irony of my hesitation wasn't lost on me. Here I was, turning over in my mind the very opportunity that Ryan had taken for granted, had assumed was his birthright rather than something to be earned. The difference was, I understood the weight of it. I knew what it meant to hold other people's careers, dreams, and livelihoods in your hands. That awareness was both a strength and a burden. By Sunday evening, I had made my decision. I called Mr. Cole at home, something I would never have done before all this happened. "I'm ready to talk about the offer," I said when he answered. "Should we meet early tomorrow?" "No need to wait," he replied. "I'm actually still at the office. Old habits die hard." When I arrived, I found him not in his elegant corner suite but in the small conference room where we had signed the Kingswell deal, a room that had become something of a talisman for both of us. "So," he said as I sat down across from him, "have you decided?" I nodded. "I'll accept the position, but I have conditions." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I would expect nothing less from you at this point. I want to restructure how we approach client relationships. Not just cosmetic changes, fundamental ones. More transparency, more accountability, more direct lines of communication between our teams and the people we serve." He leaned forward, interested. "Go on." "And I want to implement a mentorship program, formal, structured, with real resources behind it. We have too many talented people who get overlooked because they don't fit a certain mold or don't have the right connections. Like you once were," he observed. "Exactly." I paused, gathering my thoughts for the final and most important condition. "And I want a seat on the succession planning committee." His eyebrows rose. "That's traditionally reserved for board members and the CEO." "I know. But the future of this company shouldn't be decided solely by financial metrics or family connections. It should be shaped by people who understand its culture, its values, and what makes it truly successful." He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with new interest. Finally he nodded. "Done. All of it." We shook hands, and just like that my path was set. The announcement went out the next morning. An all-company email followed by a brief ceremony in the main atrium. As I stood before my colleagues, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about my vision for the new role, I caught sight of May at the back of the crowd. She gave me a thumbs up and mouthed, "You earned this." And for the first time since that day by the coffee machine, I felt completely, unquestionably certain of my place in this company. The transition to my new role was both smoother and more challenging than I had anticipated. Smoother because the team welcomed the fresh perspective. More challenging because the scope of the position was vast, touching every aspect of how we engaged with our clients worldwide. I spent the first month listening more than talking, sitting in on calls, reviewing correspondence, meeting with account managers at every level. I wanted to understand not just what we were doing, but why we were doing it, and how it could be done better. The patterns I uncovered were revealing. Under Ryan's brief tenure, communication had become formalized to the point of rigidity. People were following procedures but missing opportunities, too afraid of making mistakes to take meaningful risks. Innovation had stagnated. Relationships had grown distant. We had been operating efficiently but without heart. My first major initiative was to reintroduce the human element to our client interactions. I rolled out a program called Beyond the Contract, a systematic approach to understanding our clients' broader objectives, not just the specific services they had requested. It meant deeper research, more personalized attention, and a willingness to occasionally say, "This isn't actually what you need, and here's why." Initially, there was resistance, particularly from the finance department, which worried about the additional hours and resources. But when the first quarter results came in showing a 31% increase in contract renewals and a significant uptick in client-referred new business, the skepticism began to fade. 6 months into my tenure as CCO, I was reviewing performance metrics in my office when there was a knock at the door. I looked up to find Marcus, the security guard from the lobby, standing somewhat awkwardly in the doorway. "Miss Harris, sorry, I mean Chief Harris," he corrected himself with a smile. "There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she's quite insistent." I raised an eyebrow. Did she give a name? Eliza Cole. The name hit me like a physical force. Ryan's sister. The one family member who had remained conspicuously absent throughout the entire ordeal. She had been studying abroad when everything happened. At least, that was the official story. Some speculated she had deliberately distanced herself from the family business, wanting nothing to do with her brother's approach to leadership. "Send her up," I said, curiosity overcoming my initial hesitation. A few minutes later, a woman appeared in my doorway, mid-30s, with her father's sharp eyes and a poised confidence that reminded me more of her mother than either male Cole. "Lily," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for seeing me without notice."
I'm Elisa. I shook her hand, gestert vorher zusit.
"What can I do for you, Miss Cole?" She smiled faintly. "Eliza, please. And actually, I'm here to discuss what I might be able to do for the company." I leaned back, surprised. "I wasn't aware you had an interest in joining Cole Industries." "I didn't," she admitted. "For a long time. I wanted nothing to do with it. I saw what the pressure did to Ryan, how it twisted him. I chose a different path. And now I think I was wrong to stay away. Not about Ryan, he made his own choices. And they were the wrong ones. But about the company itself. It's part of my legacy too. And from what I've been hearing, it's finally becoming the kind of organization I could be proud to be associated with." Her directness was refreshing, but I remained cautious. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I've spent the last decade in international development," she said, "building sustainable business models in emerging markets. I understand cultural nuances, regional economics, and how to create partnerships that benefit all parties involved." She paused. "The Kingswell deal was brilliant, but it's just the beginning of what's possible in those markets. I'd like to help expand that vision." I studied her carefully. Her credentials were impressive. That much I already knew from a quick scan of her LinkedIn profile on my phone while waiting for her to arrive. But it was the absence of entitlement in her manner that intrigued me most. Unlike Ryan, she wasn't demanding a place at the table. She was offering to earn one. "Have you spoken with your father about this?" I asked. She nodded. "Briefly. He suggested I talk to you first, since international client development would fall under your division. So this was a test for both of us." Mr. Cole was watching to see how I would handle a potential nepotism situation. And he was watching to see if his daughter approached the opportunity with humility, rather than expectation. "Clever. We do have an opening on the international team," I said carefully. "But it's a director-level position, reporting to Jackson Chan. It's not C-suite or executive committee." "I wouldn't expect it to be," she replied without hesitation. "I need to learn this company from the inside out. I have the external experience, but I don't know Cole's internal operations or culture." I couldn't help but smile. In that moment, she had demonstrated more leadership potential than her brother had in his entire career with the company. "In that case," I said, "I think Jackson would be very interested in meeting with you. I'll arrange it for later this week, if that works for your schedule. She stood, offering her hand again. That would be perfect. Thank you for your time, Lily. I shook her hand, noting the firm, confident grip. One more thing, Eliza. Why come to me directly? Your father could have simply placed you wherever he wanted. She paused at the door, considering her answer. Because this isn't about family connections anymore. It's about merit. And from everything I've heard, you're the person who made that change happen. After she left, I sat quietly for a few minutes, processing the encounter. It was strange how life created these full circles, these opportunities for redemption and growth. A year ago, I had been fired by one Cole sibling. Today, I was potentially hiring another. The symmetry was almost poetic. But more than that, it was a testament to how much had changed, not just in my own position but in the very DNA of the company. That evening, as I was preparing to leave, Mr. Cole appeared in my doorway. I see you met my daughter, he said, leaning against the frame. I nodded. She's impressive. Very different from. I caught myself, but he waved it away. From Ryan. Yes, she always was. Different priorities, different approach to life. She's much more like her mother that way. He stepped into the office, taking a seat across from my desk. She told me you're setting her up with Jackson. Entry-level position. No special treatment. Is that a problem? Asked, watching his face carefully. He smiled. Quite the opposite. It's exactly right. He paused, seeming to choose his next words with care. I made many mistakes with Ryan. Groomed him too early. Shielded him from consequences. Created a sense of inevitability about his succession. I won't repeat those errors with Eliza. She seems determined to earn her place, I observed. She is. Always has been. He looked out the window, his expression softening with something like pride. You know, when she was 10 years old, she refused to accept a trophy for a spelling bee, because she said she hadn't studied as hard as the other finalists. Said it wouldn't be fair. He shook his head, smiling at the memory. I should have paid more attention to those signs in both my children. It was the most personal conversation we'd ever had. This glimpse into his private reflections as a father rather than a CEO. I wasn't quite sure how to respond, so I simply nodded. He stood, straightening his jacket. Anyway, I trust your judgment with her. Treat her like any other talented candidate with potential. Nothing more, nothing less. I will, I promised. As he turned to leave, he paused again. Oh, and Lily? The succession planning committee meets next Tuesday. 9 a.m. main boardroom. As our newest member, you might want to prepare some thoughts on where you see the company in 10 years. With that, he was gone, leaving me with the distinct impression that a torch was being passed, not just to me, but to a new generation of leaders who would shape the company's future based on merit rather than heredity. The office was quiet now, most employees having departed for the evening. I gathered my things, switched off the lights, and took one last look around before closing the door. The nameplate no longer felt strange to me. Lily Harris, Chief Client Officer. Though sometimes I still caught myself doing a double take when I saw it. Not out of disbelief, but out of appreciation for the journey that had brought me here. As I walked through the executive floor, I passed the office that had once been Ryan's, now occupied by our new Chief Technology Officer, a brilliant woman who had been overlooked for years before I advocated for her promotion. She was still at her desk, focused intently on her computer screen, likely solving some complex systems integration issue that would have overwhelmed her predecessor. I knocked lightly on her open door. Heading out, Christine? She looked up, blinking as if returning from a different dimension. Just finishing this architecture review. The Singapore team needs it by their morning. I smiled. It'll be there. But don't stay too late. The problems will still be there tomorrow. She returned the smile. a look of understanding passing between us, the unspoken acknowledgement of the fine line between dedication and self-sacrifice, a line we were all learning to navigate more healthily. The elevator ride to the lobby was swift and silent, giving me a moment to reflect on the day's events. Eliza's appearance had been unexpected, but somehow it felt like the closing of a circle, the final piece falling into place in this story of corporate redemption. The lobby was empty save for the night security team. As I crossed the marble floor toward the exit, my footsteps echoing in the vast space, I caught my reflection in the glass doors, confident, poised, at peace with my place in the world. Outside, the city was alive with energy, cars streaming past, lights glowing in office buildings where other late workers were still hunched over desks, street vendors packing up their carts after a long day. I took a deep breath of the evening air, savoring the simple pleasure of ending a day well spent. My phone buzzed with a message from May. Presentation for the Tokyo team is ready for your review. Also, we're all going for drinks to celebrate Christine's promotion. Join us. I smiled and typed back. On my way. As I walked toward the restaurant where the team was gathering, I passed a small park where a group of young professionals sat huddled on benches, looking tired and dejected. One young woman was openly crying while her colleagues attempted to comfort her. I slowed my pace, recognizing the universal signs of a brutal day in corporate America. Perhaps a project failure, a public dressing down, or even a termination. For a moment, I considered approaching them, offering some word of encouragement or perspective. But sometimes those wounds needed to breathe on their own before a stranger's advice could be meaningful. Instead, I made a mental note to remind my own team tomorrow about the importance of dignity in the workplace, even perhaps especially during difficult moments. My path had taught me that how we treat people in their lowest moments defines us far more than how we celebrate their highest achievements. The restaurant was just ahead, warm light spilling from its windows onto the sidewalk. I could see May through the glass, gesturing animatedly as she told a story to the gathered group. Christine sat beside her, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in weeks. There were others too, Jackson from International, Sarah from Legal, David from the audit team, that had helped uncover Ryan's sabotage. People who had become more than colleagues. They were allies, confidants, friends. As I approached the door, I paused for just a moment, taking in the scene. 1 year ago, I had stood in Ryan's office, hearing those dismissive words that were meant to end my career. Instead, they had been the catalyst for transformation, not just for me but for an entire organization. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The group erupted in cheers when they saw me, raising glasses in welcome. Christine made room beside her, patting the seat with a smile. Just in time, she said. We were about to toast. I settled in, accepted the glass of champagne that Jackson slid toward me. To Christine, May announced, raising her glass. Our new CTO, and proof that the best person for the job is just that, the best person. To Christine, we all echoed. As the conversation flowed around me, talk of projects and clients, but also of lives outside the office, of dreams and challenges and small daily victories. I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what success looked like, not corner offices or impressive titles, but a culture where people could thrive, where merit was recognized, where each person's contribution was valued. One afternoon about a month later, I was reviewing our quarterly performance metrics when my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. Mr. Ryan Cole is here to see you, ma'am. The words hung in the air like a sudden clap of thunder on a clear day. Ryan, here. After almost a year of complete silence, my heart rate quickened, but I kept my expression neutral. Send him in. The man who walked through my door was not the same one who had fired me that day by the coffee machine. His expensive suit hung a bit loose on his frame, and the confident swagger had been replaced by a careful, measured gait. But the most striking change was in his eyes. The arrogance had given way to something more complicated, a mix of wariness and what appeared to be genuine discomfort. "Lily," he said, his voice softer than I remembered. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "What can I do for you, Ryan?" He sat, his movements stiff, rehearsed. "I'm in town for a few days. Thought it might be time to clear the air." I leaned back, studying him. "That's a broad objective." A hint of his old impatience flickered across his face, quickly suppressed. "I know. He stopped, started again. "I've had a lot of time to think about what happened, about what I did." I remained silent, giving him space to continue. This was clearly difficult for him, and some petty part of me enjoyed that fact, though I tried to keep that satisfaction from showing on my face. "I was wrong," he said finally. "Not just about you, but about everything. How to lead, how to treat people, what this company needed." The admission seemed to physically pain him, like pulling a deeply embedded splinter from his flesh. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or another chance. I just wanted to tell you that to your face. You deserved better than what I did." I considered his words carefully. Was this genuine remorse or another calculated move? People like Ryan rarely changed fundamentally, but they could learn from catastrophic failures. "What are you doing now?" asked, neither accepting nor rejecting his apology. He gave a small, rueful smile. "Nothing impressive. Consulting for a small firm in Seattle. Starting at the bottom. Learning the business properly this time." "Your choice." "The only offers I got," he admitted. "But it's been educational. Humbling. Necessary." I nodded slowly. "Well, I appreciate you coming by to say this. It can't have been easy." "No," he agreed. "But neither was what you went through because of me." He stood, seemingly relieved to have delivered his message. "That's all I wanted to say. I won't take up more of your time." As he turned to leave, I found myself saying, "Ryan." He paused, looking back. "For what it's worth, I think starting over can be the best thing that happens to someone. It was for me." A complex emotion crossed his face. Gratitude mixed with regret, and perhaps a touch of resentment that I had flourished in the aftermath of our conflict while he had fallen. "Goodbye, Lily." "Goodbye, Ryan." After he left, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing the unexpected encounter. There had been no dramatic reconciliation, no tearful apologies or promises of friendship. Just a quiet acknowledgement of past wrongs and the subtle recognition that both our paths had been irrevocably altered by that day in his office. And somehow, that felt right. Not a neat Hollywood ending, but a realistic human one, with all its messy, unresolved emotions and cautious growth. Later that afternoon, as I was heading to a meeting, I ran into Mr. Cole in the hallway. The knowing look in his eye told me he was aware of Ryan's visit. "He called me yesterday," he confirmed when I raised an eyebrow. "Asked if it would be appropriate for him to stop by." "You didn't mention it." "Wasn't my place to prepare you. Some conversations need to happen without rehearsal." I nodded, understanding his reasoning. "How did you leave things with him?" I asked, curious about the father-son relationship that had been so damaged by everything that had transpired. A complicated expression crossed his face, the look of a parent who loves their child, but cannot shield them from the consequences of their own actions. "We're talking again. Monthly calls. A work in progress." "That's something," I offered. "Yes," he agreed quietly. "It's something." The board meeting that afternoon was focused on our 5-year expansion strategy. As Chief Client Officer, I presented our vision for growing our international presence, building on the success of the Kingswell model, but tailored for various regional markets. When I finished, the room was quiet for a moment, That particular quality of silence that comes not from disinterest but from absorbed consideration. Eleanor, the board member who had first commented on my department's performance all those months ago, was the first to speak. "This is exactly the kind of forward-thinking approach we need," she said, looking around at her colleagues. "Ambitious but grounded in reality. Innovative but building on proven success." The rest of the board murmured agreement, and Mr. Cole caught my eye from across the table, the slight nod of his head conveying both approval and a certain satisfaction, as if this moment was the culmination of something he had long envisioned. As the meeting concluded and people gathered their materials to leave, I found myself lingering, watching the interactions around the table. The dynamics had shifted so fundamentally from a year ago, more collaborative, more respectful, more focused on merit than on hierarchy. The transformation wasn't perfect or complete. No organizational change ever is. But it was real and deeply rooted. My assistant appeared at the door, reminding me of my next appointment, a coffee meeting with Eliza Cole, who had indeed joined Jackson's international team, and was proving to be as competent and hard-working as her initial interview had suggested. As I gathered my presentation materials, I glanced once more around the boardroom, at the place where, not so long ago, I had sat watching Ryan's career implode, while mine found an unexpected new beginning. One afternoon about 6 months later, I was standing by the office coffee machine, adding a dash of oat milk to my afternoon blend, when I experienced the strangest sense of déjà vu. The parallels to that day when Ryan had approached me weren't lost on me, but this time I was smiling at the memory rather than tensing at its impact. So much had changed since then, not just my position or the company culture, but my own understanding of power, leadership, and resilience. A junior associate stepped up beside me. Waiting her turn for the coffee, I recognized her as one of our newest hires, Zoe, a promising data analyst with an unconventional background in cultural anthropology. "Chief Harris," she acknowledged with a nervous smile. "Lily, please," I corrected her gently. "At least by the coffee machine." Her smile relaxed a fraction. "Lily then. I just wanted to say that your presentation at the all-hands meeting yesterday was really inspiring. Especially the part about finding your voice in challenging environments." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "It's something I feel strongly about." She hesitated, then added, "I've heard stories about what happened with the previous management, about how you stood your ground. It's nice to know that integrity actually means something here." I studied her for a moment, young, talented, perhaps a bit uncertain of her place in this corporate world, but determined to carve out a meaningful role for herself. "It does," I assured her, "but not without people willing to defend it, even when it's difficult." She nodded, absorbing this. "Well, thank you for setting that example." As she moved past me to prepare her coffee, I felt a warm sense of continuity. The knowledge that the story didn't end with my promotion or Ryan's departure, or even the company's transformation. It continued through people like Zoe, who would face their own challenges and make their own choices about what kind of professionals, what kind of people, they wanted to be. I walked back toward my office, passing the spot where I had once packed my belongings in humiliated silence. Today, it was occupied by a small collaborative workspace, where a team of designers and writers huddled around a prototype, engaged in animated discussion about user experience and brand messaging. Life moved on. Organizations evolved. People grew. Sometimes through success, sometimes through failure, but always through the choices they made in response to both. One afternoon a year after Ryan's visit, I received an email that momentarily stopped my breath. The sender was Kingswell Industries, specifically Mr. Saad's office. The subject line read simply, "Acquisition offer." I opened it with a strange mixture of curiosity and apprehension, quickly scanning the contents. It was brief and direct. Kingswell was interested in acquiring coal industries. They wanted to discuss terms at our earliest convenience. I sat back in my chair, mind racing. This wasn't entirely unexpected. There had been industry rumors about Kingswell's expansion plans, and our partnership had been so successful that a merger of some kind had always been a distant possibility. But the timing was surprising, and the implications were enormous. I forwarded the email to Mr. Cole with a single question. Thoughts? His response came within minutes. My office. For PM. Bring your perspective, not just the numbers. The meeting that followed included just 4 people. Mr. Cole, myself, our CFO, and the head of legal. No assistants, no note-takers, no executive committee. Just the core decision-makers facing a choice that would reshape the company's future. They're offering a premium of 32% over our current market value, the CFO noted. Reviewing the preliminary terms. Financially, it's excellent. But what about our people? I asked. What about our culture? Everything we've built over the past year. Mr. Cole leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. That's exactly why I wanted this small group first. This isn't just a financial decision. He looked directly at me. You know Kingswell better than anyone. You built this relationship. What's your read on their intentions? I considered the question carefully. Mr. Sod values what we've created. He's mentioned more than once how impressed he is with our client-centered approach, our innovation pipeline, our team structure. I don't think he wants to dismantle that. But, Mr. Cole prompted, hearing the hesitation in my voice. But acquisitions have a way of erasing the acquired company's identity, no matter how well-intentioned the buyer. Corporate integration almost always means cultural dilution. The CFO nodded. She's right. We've seen it dozens of times across the industry. So what are our options? Mr. Cole asked. Looking around the table, the legal head spoke up. We could decline, of course. Our position is strong enough to continue independently. We could counter with a partnership expansion instead of an acquisition. Or we could accept but negotiate strong protections for our operational independence. Mr. Cole turned back to me. Lily? Your recommendation? It was a profound moment. Being asked to help decide the fate of the company that had once cast me out, and then elevated me beyond my expectations. I felt the weight of it. Not just for myself, but for everyone whose lives and careers were tied to coal industries. I think we consider a fourth option, I said slowly. A reverse merger. The room fell silent as they processed my suggestion. You want us to acquire Kingswell? The CFO asked, incredulous. No, I clarified. I'm suggesting a true merger of equals. But with our management team taking the lead on integration and culture. Mr. Sod is approaching retirement age. He's built an impressive company. But he's concerned about succession. He's mentioned it to me several times. What if we position this not as either company absorbing the other, but as a genuine joining of complementary strengths? With our leadership model as the foundation. Mr. Cole leaned back, a smile slowly spreading across his face. Ambitious, he said. And completely unexpected. Which is precisely why it might work. The legal head added, warming to the idea. If we approach this as partners rather than as buyer and seller, we change the entire dynamic of the negotiation. It would require delicate handling. The CFO cautioned. Financials would need to be structured carefully to satisfy shareholders on both sides. And Sod himself might resist giving up control, the legal head pointed out. Not if we frame it properly, I countered. This isn't about taking control away. It's about ensuring his legacy. About building something that honors what he's created, while allowing it to grow beyond what either company could achieve independently. Mr. Cole studied me for a long moment. You really believe this could work? I do, I said with quiet confidence. I know these people. I've built trust with them, and I think they'd respect the boldness of the approach. He nodded slowly. Draft the proposal. Just the four of us for now. Let's see what a reverse merger might actually look like before we take it any further. As we left his office an hour later, he held me back with a light touch on my arm. That was unexpected, he said when the others had gone. But then you've made a career of defying expectations lately. I smiled. I learned from experience that sometimes the path forward isn't on any existing map. Indeed. He hesitated, then added, you know, if this works, if we actually pull off a merger of equals with Kingswell taking our leadership structure, it would create one of the largest independently owned firms in the industry. I know. The board would need to reconsider succession planning. For my position, I met his gaze steadily, understanding the implication. That's a conversation for another day, I said. Right now, let's focus on making this merger work. He nodded, but his eyes held a knowing look. Another day, he agreed, but perhaps not as distant as you might think. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of confidential strategy sessions, careful document drafting, and subtle relationship management. I reached out to Mr. Saad directly, suggesting a private dinner to discuss mutual opportunities, without specifying the nature of our proposal. He agreed immediately, and 3 days later, we sat across from each other in a quiet corner of an exclusive restaurant, the city lights twinkling beyond the window beside us. Lily, he said warmly as we settled into our seats. It has been too long since we spoke directly. How are you finding your new role? Challenging and rewarding, I replied honestly. And how are things at Kingswell? I understand your eastern expansion is exceeding projections. He smiled, pleased that I had kept track of his company's movements. Yes, the Malaysian office is performing particularly well. But I suspect you didn't invite me to dinner merely to discuss quarterly results. No, I admitted. I wanted to talk about your acquisition offer, but perhaps from a different angle than you might expect. His eyebrows rose slightly. I'm listening. Over the next 2 hours, as we worked our way through an excellent meal, I outlined the concept of a true merger, not an acquisition by either side, but a carefully structured integration that would preserve the strengths of both organizations while creating something greater than the sum of its parts. I emphasized the cultural alignment, the complementary market positions, and the powerful statement such a merger would make in an industry increasingly dominated by massive, impersonal conglomerates. Most importantly, I spoke directly to what I knew mattered most to him: legacy. Your company reflects your values, Mr. Saad, I said as we finished our dessert. The precision, the integrity, the respect for tradition while embracing innovation. Those shouldn't be lost or diluted. They should be amplified, extended, given new life in a larger entity that carries those same principles forward. He studied me thoughtfully, his expression giving nothing away. And Coal Industries? What does Richard hope to gain from this arrangement? The same thing you do, I answered. A future for what he's built that honors its foundations while allowing it to grow and evolve. He nodded slowly. This is not what I expected when I sent that email. Sometimes the unexpected path is the most promising one. Indeed. He set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. I will need to consider this proposal carefully, to discuss it with my advisors. Of course. But, he continued, looking me directly in the eye, I find the concept intriguing. It has merit worth exploring. When I reported back to Mr. Cole the next morning, he was cautiously optimistic. Intriguing is good, he said. From Saad, it's practically effusive. He'll want more concrete details now. Financial structures, leadership integration, operational specifics. Then let's give them to him, Mr. Cole replied. Full team now, but still confidential until we have something solid. The next month passed in a blur of intensive work, as we fleshed out every aspect of the potential merger. The financial teams crafted a balanced equity structure that fairly valued both companies. The legal departments outlined governance frameworks that would provide stability, while allowing for cultural integration. And I worked directly with our client teams to map out how our combined resources could better serve our existing partners, while positioning us to attract new ones. Throughout it all, I maintained regular contact with Mr. Saad, answering his questions, addressing his concerns, building the relationship that would be essential for the merger to succeed. It was exhausting but exhilarating work, the kind of complex, meaningful challenge that I had always thrived on. Then, 6 weeks after our initial dinner, came the message I had been hoping for. I am prepared to discuss final terms. My team will be in your city next Thursday. Shall we say 10 a.m. at your offices? The day of the meeting arrived with a sense of electric anticipation. Our boardroom had been prepared with meticulous attention to detail, from the cultural touches that would make Mr. Saad's team feel welcome to the comprehensive presentation materials awaiting each attendee. Mr. Cole and I stood together at the window, watching the Kingswell cars pull up to the building entrance. "Ready?" he asked quietly. "As ready as we'll ever be," I replied. "It's a good proposal. Fair, forward-thinking, respectful of both organizations." "Yes," he agreed. "But mergers aren't just about proposals on paper. They're about people trusting each other enough to join their futures together." I nodded, feeling the weight of that truth. Trust had been central to everything we'd built over the past year. Trust between colleagues, between departments, between leadership and staff. Now we were asking for trust on an even larger scale. Mr. Saad entered the room with his usual dignified presence, followed by his CFO, legal counsel, and operations director. After the initial greetings and formalities, we settled into our places around the table. For the next 4 hours, we walked through every aspect of the proposed merger. Financial structures, operational integration, leadership roles, market positioning, and cultural alignment. Questions were raised and answered from both sides. Concerns were addressed with transparency and care. Throughout it all, I watched Mr. Saad closely, noting how he listened as much as he spoke, his sharp eyes missing nothing. When the formal presentation concluded, he glanced at his team members, receiving their subtle nods of approval, then turned to Mr. Cole. "We have reviewed your proposal thoroughly," he said, his voice measured and calm. "We have discussed it among ourselves at length, and we believe," he paused, building a moment of tension that made my heart race, "that this merger of equals offers the best path forward for both our companies." The room seemed to collectively exhale. Mr. Cole extended his hand across the table. "Then let's build something extraordinary together." As they shook hands, I caught Mr. Saad's eye. He gave me a small nod of acknowledgement, a gesture that conveyed both respect and a certain satisfaction, as if he had known all along that this was where our path together would lead. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Due diligence teams pored over financial records, lawyers drafted complex agreements, and communication specialists prepared the messaging that would introduce the merger to employees, clients, and the public. Through it all, I found myself at the center of the integration planning, the person trusted by both sides to ensure that the cultural promises of the merger would be fulfilled alongside its financial and operational goals. Late one evening, as I was reviewing the proposed organizational structure for the client services division of our soon-to-be combined entity, Mr. Cole appeared at my office door. "Still here?" he asked, though his own presence at this hour suggested he was no less committed to the process. "Just finishing the integration roadmap for the client teams," I replied. gesturing to the complex flowchart on my screen. It's coming together well. He nodded, then rather than leaving, took a seat across from my desk. I had an interesting conversation with the board today, he said after a moment of silence. Something in his tone made me look up. About the merger? About leadership? About the future? I set down my pen, giving him my full attention. The merger will be finalized in approximately 6 weeks, he continued. At that point we become a new entity, not Cole, not Kingswell, but something that honors both legacies while creating its own. Yes, I agreed, wondering where this was heading. The board believes, and I concur, that this new entity needs leadership that embodies its integrated vision. Leadership that understands both cultures, but isn't bound by either's past limitations. He paused, his eyes holding mine steadily. They're creating a new position, executive chair of the merged company. They've asked me to take it. A role focused on strategic vision and external relationships, stepping back from day-to-day operations. The implication hung in the air between us, clear but still unspoken. And the CEO position? I asked quietly. They would like to offer it to you, he said simply. With Mr. Saad's full endorsement, I might add. I sat very still, absorbing the enormity of what he was suggesting. CEO of a merged international company, with over 2,000 employees and clients on 4 continents. From fire to chief executive in less than 2 years. The trajectory was almost unbelievable. I know it's a lot to process, Mr. Cole continued. You don't need to answer immediately. The board will make the formal offer next week, after they've finalized the details of the compensation package and transition timeline. It's not about the package, I said, finding my voice. It's about whether I'm the right person to lead this new organization through what will undoubtedly be a challenging integration period. He smiled slightly. That's exactly why you are the right person. You're asking the question from a place of responsibility, not entitlement. I nodded slowly, still processing. I'll need to think about it. Of course. But Lily. He paused, making sure he had my complete attention. Remember that day in my office after Ryan fired you? When you came back on your own terms to save the Kingswell deal? I remember. You told me then that I owed the company a leader who understood the difference between power and responsibility. You were right. And now I believe that leader is you. With that he stood, nodded once more, and left me alone with thoughts that would keep me awake long into the night. The formal offer came as promised, presented by the board with a solemnity that reflected the significance of the role they were proposing. I listened as they outlined their vision for the merged company, the challenges they anticipated, and the reasons they believed I was the right person to navigate those challenges as CEO. When they finished, Eleanor, who would remain on the board of the new entity, asked, "Do you have any questions for us, Lily?" I had prepared for this moment, knowing that my response would set the tone for my leadership if I accepted. Just one, I said. What kind of company do we want to become? It was not the question they had expected, not about compensation or authority or metrics, and the thoughtful silence that followed told me it was exactly the right one to ask. We spent the next hour discussing vision and values, culture and purpose, the kind of organization we wanted to build beyond balance sheets and market share. When I left that meeting, my decision was made. 2 days later, I sat in Mr. Cole's office, the place where my journey had both nearly ended and truly begun. I'll accept the position, I said, with 2 conditions. He smiled slightly.
I'm listening.
First, a comprehensive mentorship program across all levels of the organization, with particular emphasis on identifying and developing talent from underrepresented groups. Real resources, real commitment, not just a corporate talking point. Agreed, he said without hesitation. And your second condition? That we create a corporate ethics council with real authority, not just to enforce compliance but to actively shape our practices and policies, to ensure that how we succeed remains as important as what we achieve. He nodded slowly, approval evident in his expression. In other words, you want to institutionalize the values that were missing when Ryan was making decisions. Precisely. Done, he said simply. And if I may say so, those conditions tell me we've chosen well. The merger was announced to the public 3 weeks later, to considerable industry surprise and generally positive market reaction. The press release emphasized the complementary strengths of the two organizations and the continuity of leadership that would guide the integration process. My name was included as the designated CEO of the merged entity, while Mr. Cole was named executive chair and Mr. Saad would serve as a special advisor during the transition before joining the board of directors. The internal announcement came first, of course, a joint message from Mr. Cole and Mr. Saad to all employees of both companies, followed by departmental meetings to address specific questions and concerns. I attended as many of these sessions as possible, listening more than speaking, taking note of the hopes and fears expressed by people at all levels of the organization. It was during one of these meetings with the combined client services teams that I found myself face to face with the full circle of my journey. A younger team member, an account manager from the Kingswell side, raised her hand hesitantly. "Miss Harris," she began, "there's a story going around about how you were fired and then brought back to save a major deal. Is that true, or is it just office legend?" The room fell silent. Everyone from the Cole side knew the story, of course, but few had ever heard it addressed directly. I considered deflecting the question, moving on to more comfortable territory. But the moment called for honesty, for the kind of transparency I hoped would define our new organization. "It's true," I said simply. "I was fired by our previous CEO, who didn't understand the terms of a contract I had negotiated. I was brought back because I was the only one who could legally finalize the deal." Murmurs rippled through the room. "That deal," I continued, "was with Kingswell Industries, the very partnership that led step by step to the merger we're now implementing." The Kingswell employees exchanged surprised glances. "So without that firing," someone began. "We might not be sitting here together today," I confirmed. "Which is why I believe that setbacks, even painful, unfair ones, can sometimes be the first step toward something better than we had originally imagined." "How did you do it?" asked the woman who had raised the initial question. "How did you come back from that and still find the confidence to lead?" It was a deeply personal question, but one that deserved an honest answer. "I remembered what I knew to be true," I said. "About myself, about my work, about what leadership should look like. And I refused to let someone else's poor judgment redefine that truth." As I looked around the room, at the faces of people from both companies, all now part of a shared future we would build together, I realized that the story of my firing and return had become more than a personal narrative. It had become a foundational myth for our new organization. A tale about resilience, about integrity, about the difference between authority and leadership. The merger proceeded over the next several months, with the expected challenges and unexpected surprises that accompany any major corporate integration. There were difficult decisions about redundant positions, tense negotiations over territorial boundaries between departments, and the inevitable cultural friction as different work styles and expectations collided. But there were triumphs too: successful client transitions, innovative collaborations between formerly separate teams, and moments of genuine connection across organizational divides. Through it all, I tried to lead with the principles that had guided me since that pivotal day in Ryan's office: clarity about expectations, respect for everyone's contributions, and an unwavering focus on building something worthy of the trust placed in me. 6 months after the merger was finalized, we held our first all-company gathering, a carefully planned event that brought together employees from all locations for a day of reflection, celebration, and forward-looking strategy. Standing at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces representing our now unified organization, I felt a profound sense of responsibility and gratitude. When I look at what we've accomplished together, I see more than successful integration metrics or impressive quarterly results. I see people who have embraced change, who have extended trust across former boundaries, who have committed themselves to building something greater than any of us could create alone. The room was quiet, attentive. 2 years ago, I continued, I stood in an office being told that my services were no longer needed, that I was, in essence, dispensable. Today, I stand before you not because I'm indispensable. None of us is. But because I refuse to accept someone else's limited vision of my worth or my potential. I paused, looking around the room, making eye contact with as many people as possible. And that is what I want for each of you, and for our company as a whole. I want us to refuse the limitations that others might place on us. I want us to see setbacks not as endings but as redirections. And most of all, I want us to remember that how we treat each other in our most challenging moments defines who we truly are as an organization. The applause that followed was warm and sustained, not the obligatory response to a CEO's speech, but a genuine acknowledgement of shared values and common purpose. As I stepped away from the podium, I caught sight of Mr. Cole and Mr. Saad, seated side by side in the front row. They were both applauding, their expressions reflecting a particular kind of satisfaction, the kind that comes from seeing something you've built evolve into something even better than you had imagined. Later that evening, at the reception following the formal program, I found myself standing once again by a coffee station, adding a dash of oat milk to my cup. The symmetry made me smile, life's strange way of creating echoes, of bringing us back to significant places, but with new perspective. Something amusing? Asked a voice beside me. I turned to find Eliza Cole, who had proven her value many times over during the merger process, and now headed our expanded international development division. Just appreciating life's ironies, I replied. Coffee stations seem to be important markers in my career path. She smiled, understanding the reference to her brother's fateful confrontation. You've come a long way from that moment. We all have, I said, glancing around at the mingling groups of employees. Former competitors now colleagues, former strangers now collaborators. That's what happens when we refuse to let one person's poor judgment define our possibilities. Eliza nodded thoughtfully. You know, I spoke with Ryan last week. This was surprising news. Oh? He's doing better, she said. Running a small consultancy now, focused on corporate ethics, interestingly enough. Teaching executives how not to make the mistakes he made. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Failures really can be redirections, then. For some, she agreed. For those willing to learn from them. As the evening wound down and people began to depart, I found myself standing at the large windows overlooking the city, much as Mr. Cole and I had done on the day of our final negotiation with Kingswell. The urban landscape spread out before me, lights glowing in office buildings and apartments, cars moving along streets, countless lives intersecting in ways both mundane and profound. Quite a view, said Mr. Cole, joining me at the window. From up here you can almost see the patterns, how it all fits together. Yes, I agreed. Though it's easy to forget that every light represents real people, with their own challenges and triumphs. He nodded, understanding the subtext of my observation. That's why you're the right person for this role, Lily. You never forget the human element, even when dealing with the largest systems. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the city pulse with life below us. You know, he said eventually, when I asked you to come back that day to save the Kingswell deal, I thought I was offering you redemption. A chance to reclaim what had been unfairly taken. I smiled. And instead you offered us redemption. A chance to become something better than we had been before. It was perhaps the most profound compliment he could have given. An acknowledgement not just of what I had accomplished professionally, but of how those accomplishments had transformed the very culture of the organization we both served. As I drove home that night, following the now familiar route from the office to my apartment, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 2 years. From the humiliation of being fired to the complexity of leading a merged international company, a path that no one, least of all myself, could have predicted that morning by the coffee machine. The city streets were quiet at this late hour, the traffic lights changing for cars that weren't there, creating brief patterns of red and green on the empty pavement. It reminded me of how often our lives are shaped by moments of intersection, meetings and partings, challenges and opportunities, all flowing together to create the unique path each of us travels. I had been fortunate, yes, benefiting from Mr. Cole's recognition of his son's error, from the specific clause in the Kingswell contract, from being in the right place with the right skills when the merger opportunity arose. But good fortune alone hadn't brought me to this point. It had taken courage to walk out of Ryan's office with dignity and tact. It had taken strategic thinking to leverage my unique position with the Kingswell account. It had taken persistence to document the sabotage and bring it to light. And it had taken vision to see the possibility of a merger of equals when others saw only acquisition targets. As I pulled into the parking space outside my building, I realized that the most important lesson of my journey wasn't about corporate strategy or leadership principles or even professional resilience. It was about remembering who you are, your value, your integrity, your worth, even when others tried to diminish or deny it. It was about standing firm in that knowledge, not with arrogance but with quiet certainty, and allowing your actions to flow from that foundation. One afternoon a few weeks later, I received an unexpected message from Marcus, the security guard who had witnessed my departure on that fateful day 2 years earlier. "Miss Harris," his email began, "I hope it's not inappropriate to reach out to you directly, but I wanted to share something that might interest you." Attached was a link to a community college program in business administration, along with a personal note. "I've been taking night classes, inspired by watching leaders like you. Thank you for showing that integrity and success can go hand in hand." I sat back, touched by the simple message and what it represented. Leadership wasn't just about executive decisions or strategic visions. It was about the example we set, the culture we create, the ripples that extend far beyond our immediate actions. I wrote back immediately, congratulating him on his studies and offering to connect him with our education assistance program, which supported employees pursuing further education related to their career development. His grateful response arrived within minutes, along with a question about whether I remembered our brief exchange the day I had been fired. I did remember. His concerned face as I turned in my badge. His kindness in that small moment of professional trauma. "You were the only person who asked if I was all right that day," I wrote back. Small moments of compassion matter more than we realize. That evening, as I reviewed the quarterly performance reports from our newly integrated departments, I found myself thinking about all the interconnected stories that made up our organization, the security guards and administrative assistants, the account managers and department heads, the board members and executives, each with their own aspirations, challenges, setbacks, and triumphs, each contributing in their own way to the larger narrative we were writing together. My phone buzzed with a message from May, now leading her own team within our expanded Asian operations. Client loved the presentation. Contract signed. Couldn't have done it without your mentorship. Another ripple, another connection. Another reminder of how our actions extend beyond ourselves in ways we can't always anticipate. I sent back my congratulations, then returned to the reports on my desk, seeing them now not just as collections of metrics and projections, but as reflections of countless individual efforts aligned toward a common purpose. The merged company was thriving, exceeding integration targets, retaining key clients from both original organizations, and attracting new business that neither could have secured independently. But the true measure of our success wasn't found in those quantifiable outcomes. It was in the culture we were building, the trust we were establishing, the future we were creating together. Sometimes, when meeting with newer employees who had joined after the merger, I would be asked about the firing story, now a part of company lore, passed along with varying degrees of accuracy and dramatic embellishment. I never shied away from acknowledging it, but I always emphasized the lessons rather than the drama, the growth rather than the conflict. The point isn't that I was fired unfairly, I would explain. The point is that how we respond to unfairness with dignity, with strategic thinking, with resilience, shapes not just our individual paths, but the organizations we're part of. 1 year after the merger, we held a leadership retreat at a scenic mountain resort, bringing together the top executives from all divisions to reflect on our progress and plan for the future. On the final evening, after a productive day of strategy sessions, we gathered for a more informal dinner on a terrace overlooking a spectacular valley view. The conversation flowed easily, focusing not on business challenges but on personal histories, favorite books, family stories, the human connections that underpin even the most professional relationships. As the evening progressed, Mr. Cole, who had settled comfortably into his role as executive chair, raised his glass in a toast. To journeys, he said simply, both the ones we plan and the ones that surprise us. As glasses clinked and murmurs of agreement circled the table, I caught his eye and nodded slightly, acknowledging the particular journey we had shared. From that tense confrontation in his office to this moment of shared accomplishment. Later, as small groups formed for after-dinner conversations, he joined me at the terrace railing, where I had stepped away to admire the stars emerging in the darkening sky. "Penny for your thoughts," he said. I smiled. I was just thinking about perspective. How from up here, you can see the whole valley, the patterns of the landscape. But when you're down in it, all you can see is the path directly ahead of you. A metaphor for leadership, he observed. Indeed. Sometimes you need both views, the immediate path and the broader landscape. And which are you contemplating tonight? I considered the question. The landscape, I think. The journey from there to here, and where we might go next. He nodded thoughtfully. The board is very pleased with the merger results. The integration has gone more smoothly than any of us expected. We had good people leading the way at every level, I said. That makes all the difference. Yes, he agreed. But it starts at the top, with clarity about what matters and why. We stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching as the last light faded from the distant peaks. You know, he said eventually, you're fired. We don't need lazy people like you. The clock on my kitchen wall seemed to mock me as I stared at my phone, watching it light up for the 17th time that morning. Each call represented a tiny fracture in Ryan Cole's hastily constructed plan to rid himself of me, and I savored every missed ring like sips of the finest wine. Revenge, I was discovering, tasted better when served at room temperature, with patience, and just a hint of professional courtesy. I still remember the moment as if it just happened. I was standing by the office coffee machine, adding a dash of oat milk to my morning blend when Ryan, the new CEO and son of the company's founder, walked into the break room. He didn't greet me, he didn't smile. He just looked at me like I was part of the furniture he decided to throw out. "Lily, I need to see you in my office. Now." It wasn't a request. The timbre of his voice carried the entitlement of someone who had inherited authority without earning respect, a quality I'd observed in him since his father had begun grooming him for leadership 3 years prior. The hallway to his office seemed longer than usual that morning, each step on the polished marble taking me closer to what I didn't yet know would be both an ending and the most powerful beginning of my professional life. The portraits of past company leaders lined the walls, stern-faced men and women who had built coal industries from a small regional supplier into an international powerhouse. Among them was Richard Cole Sr., Ryan's father, whose piercing eyes seemed to follow me as I walked, as if trying to warn me. I had been with the company for nearly 11 years. In that time, I had built the client services department from scratch, negotiated over 100 contracts, and trained most of the team that now sat just outside his office door. But none of that mattered to Ryan. His father, Mr. Cole, had built the company with grit and loyalty. Ryan inherited the title and apparently thought it gave him the right to play God. The morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ryan's corner office caught the dust particles dancing in the air, creating an almost ethereal atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the cold exchange that was about to unfold. His office was immaculate, too immaculate, like it belonged to someone who wanted to project competence rather than embody it. He didn't even sit down. "You're fired," he said, voice flat, emotionless. "We don't need lazy people like you dragging this place down." I blinked. First, I thought it was some kind of twisted joke. The words hung in the air between us, suspended like the dust particles, waiting to settle into reality. I watched his face for any sign of humanity, a twitch of regret, a flicker of empathy, but found nothing but the cold, calculated stare of someone who had practiced this moment, perhaps rehearsed it in front of his bathroom mirror until he achieved the exact degree of corporate detachment he thought defined leadership. "Excuse me." I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. My mind raced through the previous week's meetings and reports. I had just closed the Westridge account 2 days ago, a $3.2 million deal that had been on the verge of collapse before I stepped in. Had I missed something? Was there a performance issue I hadn't been informed about? "You heard me," he replied, casually flipping through a stack of papers like he was deciding what to have for lunch. "You can collect your things and leave, effective immediately." I stared at him, stunned. My heart pounded in my ears. The room seemed to vibrate with the force of my pulse, each beat sending a wave of confusion and anger through my body. I wanted to shout, to defend myself, to demand an explanation, but instead I smiled, a calm, polite, deliberate smile. In that moment, I made a choice that would ultimately save my career and reshape the company's future, though I couldn't have known it then. "Understood," I said. "Have a nice day, Ryan." The look of surprise that flickered across his face was brief, but unmistakable. He had expected tears, pleading anger, anything but this composed acceptance. For a split second, his mask of authority slipped, revealing the insecure son still desperate for his father's approval. He recovered quickly, but I had seen it, the weakness beneath the armor. I walked out of his office with my head high, but inside I was trembling. The glass walls that surrounded the executive suite offered no privacy. My teammates looked at me as I passed, sensing something was wrong. A few started to stand, ready to ask questions, but I gave them a subtle shake of the head. "Don't make this harder." The open concept office that had once felt like a second home now stretched before me like a gauntlet I had to run one final time. Faces turned as I walked, some confused, others concerned, a few carefully blank, in that way colleagues perfect, when they don't want to be associated with someone who's fallen from grace. The finance team, huddled near the water cooler, parted as I approached, their conversation dying abruptly. I could almost hear their thoughts. What did she do? Is it contagious? Should we say something? I smiled at them too, the same measured smile I'd given Ryan. The marble tiles of the main lobby echoed with my footsteps as I approached the security desk. Marcus, the guard who had greeted me every morning for over a decade, looked up with his usual warm smile, then faltered when he saw my expression. Miss Harris? Everything all right? I nodded, not trusting my voice. Just heading out early today, Marcus. His eyes fell to the small box of personal items I carried. The framed photo of my sister's family, the handmade mug from our company retreat in Colorado, the small potted succulent that had somehow survived years under the harsh office lighting. His face softened with understanding. I'll see you tomorrow then, he asked, though we both knew it was unlikely. Take care, Marcus, I replied, fishing my badge from my pocket and placing it on his desk. It was funny how 11 years of loyalty, dedication, and achievement could be reduced to a plastic rectangle with a bad photo. I packed my desk in silence, the routine motions of emptying drawers and unplugging chargers providing a strange comfort in their mundanity. Each item I placed in the cardboard box marked another memory. The conference in Dubai where I'd secured our first international client. The late-night strategy session that had saved the Thompson account. The impromptu birthday celebration where my team had surprised me with cupcakes after I'd mentioned offhandedly that I'd never had a proper birthday party as a child. 11 years of my life, packed away in less than 15 minutes. The drive home was a blur. Traffic lights changed, cars moved around me, but I drove on autopilot. Muscle memory guiding me through familiar streets, while my mind replayed the morning's events on a continuous loop. As I drove, memories flooded my mind. 11 years. 11. I had given this company more time than I gave my own family. Late nights, working through holidays, taking calls while holding back tears after my divorce. I gave them everything. And now I was dismissed like I was nothing. But I wasn't angry, not yet. I was curious. Why? That question haunted me all night. I barely slept. Something about the way Ryan had said it, so confidently, so carelessly, didn't sit right. The timing was strange, too. We were about to finalize one of the company's largest contracts. A deal I had spent 6 months preparing. I knew the client inside and out.